Okay, Matthew, tell me what all you've been working on so far.
So far, I've been working on some of the connections going all the way back to European royalty, dealing with basically how they were the ones that originally set up the plantations here. They were the ones that kind of
Basically, the connection between the
yeah,
founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson and who else?
the founding fathers,
Which founding fathers?
such as Thomas Jefferson, uh, John Quincy Adams,
Who else? James Monroe.
Andrew Jackson.
Now, he wasn't a founding
He
father,
technically wasn't a founding father, no.
but he was groomed by these founding fathers that found what they called themselves was the aristocratic. What was it? Aristocratic what?
The aristocratic
Southern.
basically the aristocratic southern landowners and plantation owners, that sort of thing.
And they were the ones that had the wealth and power of the United States of America at that time and held the most positions of authority and power in the federal government, which their main objective was to push states' rights over federal rights, knowing that federal rights basically abolished slavery from the very beginning and basically made everyone equal.
Mm-hmm.
But states' rights elevated and kept slavery alive and kept it going, and also persecution and genocide and murder of the Native American people. So they could genocide and murder the Native American people and replace them with African slaves, which is exactly what the Spanish slave trade was all about, was eradicating and destroying the Native Americans they viewed as savages and animals, which was adopted by all the European royal families. Now, it was not adopted by the commoner people, the poor people that they ruled and mistreated and abused and even enslaved themselves in England, especially in Ireland and Scotland. That country was completely ruled by England's thumb. So that made it very interesting that I found information that pointed towards Irish and Scottish settlers were very strong enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War through free papers. Then I found that poor English settlers that were escaping persecution and mistreatment of basically the royal families of Europe, especially Spain and England, especially Spain and England's royal family. And that's where these specific founding fathers of the United States of America trace their lineage and their bloodline to, is the royal family of England, which they wanted to rule this country through royalty. That's why they wanted George Washington to be the king of the United States of America. So when they realized during the Declaration of Independence there was going to be a big fight between federal rights and states' rights, they wanted states' rights to rule over federal rights. So their main goal was to elevate states' rights. So that was the real thing that caused the Civil War, correct?
Right.
So did I miss anything in my statement whatsoever?
That's been what I've been working on.
And that's pretty much what we found. And that led up to basically Andrew Jackson, who was strongly groomed by these founding fathers that started the party known as the Democratic Republican Party, which was basically Thomas Jefferson's Republican Party, groomed him to have this powerful image, this powerful look that was basically revered the same as George Washington. And he was going to create, I could see them sitting down at a table at a bar discussing strategy on how to implement this and get this done. That they were going to split the party in order to gain full political power and control over the directions of this nation and how this nation would develop under states' rights, basically keeping people from their federal rights and preventing people from having the equality and everything that they were promised through federal rights. under the Declaration of Independence. So I could see them implementing these states' rights, which were all racist. Jim Crow Act law, which was of 1870 to 1878, was 100% states' rights. The basically the amendment to the Arkansas Constitution of 1874 that said she shall never be made a defendant in any of her courtrooms, states' rights. The deal with basically the Emancipation Proclamation was basically forced out because of states' rights versus federal rights. The Indian Removal Act, because of the great threat of Native Americans setting free African slaves, and because they viewed them as animals and less than human to be replaced with African slaves to be eradicated and destroyed. That was the whole reason behind the Trail of Tears by Andrew Jackson, and to basically better stabilize the development and building of this country through states' rights and slavery and persecution of African slaves, while genociding and killing the Native Americans, which was the Native American Removal Act was May 28th of 1830. These things would have never happened without states' rights. And the Arkansas Sovereignty Law would have never existed without the Jim Crow Act law. And us being victimized by the Arkansas Sovereignty Law, just like the Central 9 students were victimized by the Arkansas Sovereignty Law during basically September 1957, where they basically said, we're going to send in the National Guard, where it was known as the Arkansas Crisis. That would have never happened without states' rights, stripping us of our federal constitutional rights. Is that not true? And that's what you're writing about and discussing in this right here, dealing with that, and also what we're writing down here on the book. So do you have anything that you would like to add more to that? And I know you have some trouble with talking when...
I'm just curious about how this is all going to turn out. I mean...
I'm curious too. I mean, you're not a writer, but we're writing this from the standpoint of someone who has a disability, that went to a school, that became a civil rights activist, that all we ever wanted was a quality education and a healthy, positive, uplifting work environment, and that we wanted the dormitories to be clean and healthy, and also what we had for education was a good quality education. So we're fighting for the same principles and same beliefs that Mr. Oliver Brown from Topeka, Kansas, that sued the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1951 and won his lawsuit in 1954, which created the civil rights movement. We're fighting for those same principles. We are fighting for the same principles where Martin Luther King was basically the voice of the people. I became the voice of the students of ACTI, and now I'm becoming the voice of a civil rights movement through broken equality, fighting for the same qualities. And his dream was, I had a dream speech. Mine is, I dared to dream the impossible dream of unity for God's greatest gift to humanity, and freedom and justice for all of God's children, and that we should be judged on the merit of who we are in our hearts and spirits, and we all deserve a quality education, regardless of our nationality, our culture, or our heritage, or where we come from. And I'm fighting for a quality education for students, no different than the Central 9 students that were brave enough to go to Central High School and integrate Central High School under great pressures from what became the Arkansas Sovereignty Law that was passed in February of 1957 to replace the Jim Crow Act law, which was passed in 1871 to 1878, which was states' rights laws. So we have done an incredible thing, showing that this history goes all the way back to states' rights. The founding fathers that started it, their connection to royalty in England, their beliefs and principles on ruling this country through a royal standpoint, and starting what better became known as white supremacy and white superiority, racism, which developed into the singular color racist ideology belief system and the black and white world of racism. So the fact that all of this is tied to us as broken equality, and Martin Luther King, and Mr. Oliver Brown, and the Central 9 students, and Native American equality and African American equality and European American equality and Asian and Oriental and Polyasian American equality, because there's stories about Asians, about them not really knowing that there was slavery of 20,000 to 30,000 Chinese and Asian people that were enslaved here in the United States of America during the 1800s. And that went on for a very long time, and it's not even talked about or addressed. So we have found ourselves in a very interesting place as broken equality and the incredible amount of history we are intimately tied to. So I think that's pretty good. Do you have anything else to say, Matthew? You just want to get back to work?
Yeah, that's really what I need to do, is get back to work as sooner the better.
I'm a little bit better at talking. You're a little bit better at the history and writing, way better than I am. But I love you, little brother. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, well,
You want us to look at anybody? Besides, you look like you're praying.
hey. That's all I'm going to say is, hey, I mean,
You're just ready to get back to work.
yeah.
God bless everybody.